Well, good morning. It's really an honor to be here. I first want to thank the organizers, the co-organizers, and the sponsors of this, what I think is a very, very significant conference, which focuses on the Lake Chad Basin region, where we all know the needs are great and the challenges are quite daunting, as many multi-stakeholder partnerships try to figure out and decide what must happen to implement the SDG goals. I also want to extend this very special thank you to Dr. Al-Wanda and to Dr. Siddiqui, who both afforded me the opportunity to share with you today as a representative from the University of Oklahoma. I'm truly humbled and honored to be asked to briefly present to you this morning on a model that I have probably has been evolving in my head for decades, but I only operationalized in 2010, and this is a capacity building model that I have used to do pretty significant community development work in the United States and transformational work where the issues are complex, the partnerships are complex, and the tasks are very daunting. What I'm going to share with you today is just one aspect of that model, and it's my capacity building model. So you see I have these hands here because this picture for me is very symbolic. These hands represent for me what multi-stakeholder partnerships are all about. And we all know it's about people, it's about organizations that are coming together with their diverse talents, their diverse skills and perspectives, working together towards common goals. And we know it sounds simple, but at its core with us humans, these issues are very complex. This is one of my favorite quotes from John Nesbitt. It simply says, "The failure of hierarchies to solve society's problems forced people to talk to one another, and that was the beginning of networks." And as many of you know, John Nesbitt was the international #1 best-selling author of a book called Megatrends. He was a public speaker in the area of future studies, and so I'm somewhat of a futurist. So as I talk about my work today, for me it's also about all of us envisioning what a really world full of social justice and equity means for all people in the universe. Pretty simply, this is what I'm going to share today in terms of talking about one aspect of my capacity building model. Because as I listen to the comments from all the wonderful speakers who have preceded me, it is very obvious that building capacity to accomplish complex work becomes really important. So the first thing I want to do this morning, almost afternoon now, is share this aspect of my capacity building model, which is really a derivative of a bigger model that I developed in 2010 after years of deep work in communities called the High Impact Model of Technical Assistance. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those foundational strategies that serve as the foundation. We all know that relationship building is a key piece of that. And then the need sensing piece, and we heard a lot of that today, really being able to understand what the various needs of a country or a community are. And then assessing readiness. Are people ready to move forward with the rigorous, sometimes complex changes that must occur? The various aspects of capacity building of my model are in front of me. Human capacity, organizational, structural, material, and political. And one of the things I want to say at the onset, I'm probably not going to say anything that people have not done. I'm probably not going to say anything that people aren't working on in terms of how they're going about this very difficult work. For me, what this model does is it gives people a frame which to organize their thinking and a frame to organize the way they go about thinking about the work they're already doing. I'm a research psychologist by training, and often when people get to the outcomes, I will say, how did you arrive at that? And there's a thing in psychology that we call superstitious behavior. And that's when people say, I did this or I did that. But they haven't really often thought about all the moving parts and how all those moving parts came together to help them tackle those complex problems. So in the little bit of time that I'm just being told that I have, I'm going to try to rush through some of this with you. So this is the basic framework. And under this basic framework, you will see that there are these buckets of capacity building areas: human, organizational, structural, material, and political. I won't get into the details of each of these, but I will say that when we look at the overall framework, the foundation of this framework is steeped in some core principles that I've heard talked about a lot this morning: stakeholder engagement, relationship building, discovery and needs assessment. I think the discovery and needs assessment piece is critical and important. When we build these relationships, as we know, part of those multi-stakeholder partnerships include defining relationships. Who's going to be responsible in the partnership for doing what? And how do we put aside our personal agendas? How do we put aside our own egos to really focus on the needs and the work? So the partners initially have to agree on some very key things about how they're going to come together and work together to create situations that are win-win. I love what the moderator said this morning when he said in wars, there are winners and losers. I think in wars, there are losers and losers because even the winners lose because they have to deal with the aftermath of what's left over from the fractured relationships and the harm and the mayhem that's been created. So part of building these partnerships is about creating win-wins and no-win losers. So under these categories of capacity building, after those relationships are built, after deep need sensing is done in these areas, it gives a way for groups or countries and organizations to think about a more planful and strategic way that gets everyone aligned with a more common vision. Once those deep plans are done, then people are ready to begin the work. So I'll just quickly say these buckets then have elements under them. When I talk about building human capacity, one of the first questions that I'm asking is the leadership ready to assume the responsibilities that must be taken? Are they ready to make the decisions? Do they have the authority to make the decisions? And is the leadership able to bring the right focus to what needs to be done? So under each of these areas, you will see elements of what has to be assessed in a need sensing process to begin to get a deep sense of what needs to be built to effect change. Okay, so I'm going to start with political capacity. You can see there that that's really all about stakeholder engagement. Who are the stakeholders that need to be involved? One of the things I often say in the need sensing process, and I have developed tools that allow me to do a deep dive on the need sensing, is to really understand the local context. I think we know that, especially in the United States, we have spent many decades in the past going in thinking we have solutions and answers instead of trying to ask powerful questions to get a good sense of what is going on and what is needed. So I sort of operate by three philosophies with deep work that's complex. The first, seek first to understand. The second one is the Hippocratic Oath, which physicians live by. Above all else, do no harm. And the third one is we all have to be risk takers, jump, and hope a net will appear. And that's kind of what I live by. If you look at the one area that I want to spend the most time on, which I have just a few more minutes, is organizational capacity. And you see there are 4 levels of networking there. Is the multi-stakeholder partnership communicating with all the groups they should be communicating with? Are they cooperating? That is, are they assisting each other? So when I talk about collaboration, which is where I want to say the most, for me collaboration is not just about people coming together, but it really is about people creating something new and different that didn't exist before. That means there has to be give and take. So collaboration is really in the whole multi-stakeholder partnership arena. Collaboration is truly the biggest piece of what has to happen because people have to give and take. In that process, the defining of the problem must be core. The partners then have to step aside to say, based on defining the needs in this context, what do we need to work on? What are the collaborative goals? These trusting relationships, as we know, become critical. And then we have to assess what we're doing, because without that assessment and ongoing looking at whether or not what we're doing is working, we probably will not accomplish what we need to do. This is a book that was written by Hansen in 2009, and as I bring my remarks to a close, and I wish I had more time, there are a couple of things I want to say. While we can talk about accomplishing really big goals, at the end of the day, the collaborative leader is key to this process. The collaborative leader must redefine success from narrow agendas to bigger goals. The collaborative leader has to move from an autocratic approach to an inclusive decision-making approach. And as one who started a transitional school years ago for homeless kids and their families, I can tell you there was infighting, there were all kinds of things going on. But as that collaborative leader, I had to find a way to bring people together to mediate that. That school now has kids who were formerly homeless in college, so it's the collaborative leader that has to move the group from being, from blaming to being accountable. The other thing that the research tells us is that the kinds of things that interfere with a collaborative leadership style is when the collaborative leader is power hungry, when there is arrogance, when there is defensiveness, and when we allow our egos to get in the way of the work that needs to be done. So understanding what multi-state partnerships involve relative to what the role of that collaborative leader is, I think is essential to success. Very simply, these are just some of the benefits, and I don't have to go on about that because we all know that when we can create realities that result in change, it's for the benefit of the collective. This is kind of my funny slide about the power of collaboration and multi-stakeholder partnerships in terms of this is what happens when we work together. I want to end with a few quotes, and this is a quote from the former Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, who was the first woman in the United States Supreme Court. And she once said, "We don't accomplish anything in this world alone, and whatever happens is the result of the whole tapestry of one's life and all the weavings of individual threads from one to another that creates something." And I think that's a powerful quote. This is Belinda's quote. I have found out what I call the gold standard for civility. And in my mind, as we begin to tackle complex problems in the world, we have to ask ourselves, have we met this gold standard? Are all groups and individuals in our world treated with dignity and respect? And as we evolve, and I think all of us and all of our countries are evolving, because until we can say yes to that question, which is my standard, gold standard for civility, then I think we are still moving in a direction where we're trying to achieve that. And so I end with the slide that I started with, and I've gone through this briefly, really quickly, but it's my way of reminding us that learning to create multi-stakeholder partnerships and collaborating is about building new and different castles in the sandbox together. I think we're all smarter than a kindergartner, and they do this very well when they're in their sandboxes. And so I'd like to leave you with this thinking about what it takes to truly operationalize and implement this work, because we can talk about it in academic ways, we can talk about it in visionary ways, but ultimately how we as humans come together to implement, operationalize these SDGs and implement them in a way that moves us beyond the challenges, beyond the barriers, figuring out ways to tackle those is critical, in my opinion, to knocking down the barriers. I will just say, as a young woman and a child who grew up in the segregated South, social justice and equity are huge issues for me at a personal and professional level. And my hope and wish is that we continue to meet, we continue to come together to figure out how we arrive at that gold standard of equity and social justice, civility for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we have the ability to put your presentation on the internet so people can study it in more detail.
Great, thank you.
I would say in response to segregation, to me it's about intellectual resources. Segregation means that we reduce our intellectual resources.
Absolutely.
And society will work on half the machinery.
That's exactly right.
And that's also discrimination against women is the same thing, 50%. You know. So if you look at the society that are most successful in the world, they also have the most equality between men and women.
One last thing, and I know he's pulling the cord here. We are co-organizing on February 20th, is it?
13th and 14th.
13th and 14th, a conference at the UN that's strictly focused on multi-stakeholder partnerships. I'd love to be able to get everyone's email address here. Some of the folks here are co-organizers of that event with us as well. And so we will send out information and ensure that you all get an invitation. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.